we need to create 434,000 jobs per month for 2 years to make up for the job losses that we have experienced. That is going to take some significant commitment on the part of this Congress to stop the government spending and, frankly, to lower taxes on small business.
The gentleman indicates that we want to stop spending. Every economist from his side of the aisle to our side of the aisle said that if we did not spend money last year, that we wouldn't have grown the economy. In fact, Ben Bernanke, the Republican-appointed chairman of the Federal Reserve by President Bush, and Secretary Paulson, all said, you better invest or you're going to go into a depression, not a recession. And the gentleman talks about job creation. It's very interesting because, generally speaking, he wants to return to the policies of the Bush administration. And the Bush administration, of course, was the worst job-performing administration since Herbert Hoover. I know the gentleman knows that because those statistics are pretty clear. It created 19,400 jobs per month. You talk about 400 and some odd thousand jobs. I agree with the gentleman. We need to create that level if we're going to get the jobs that your economic program lost.
Always, the gentleman likes to talk about the prior administration, and I would just like to point out that during the prior administration, the last 2 years of that, his party was in control of Congress, and certainly, if we look at the numbers, did contribute to some of the problem that we've got today.
On that issue?
No, I'm not ready to yield, Madam Speaker, and I'd say back, if he is so intent on comparing the budgets and the outlook under the Bush administration to this one, I would say this: if we compare the 2011 budgets of President Bush and President Obama, President Bush's outlook and budget for this year was $2.9 trillion. The 2011 budget of this president is $3.6 trillion. We could simply cut the deficit by 50% if we just lived within President Bush's 2011 budget. And Madam Speaker, I would say to the gentleman, if you cut out all of the emergency spending caused by the recession,
the gentleman yield on
I'll yield in a minute. If you cut out all the emergency spending caused by the recession and just look at discretionary spending, since Congress votes on that every year, President Obama will increase discretionary spending by $319 billion over President Bush's budget for 2011. And so, Madam Speaker, I would say, again, we've got to do better. The American people are waiting for this body to step up in a responsible way to stop the spending, which brings on the need for yet even more debt, which ultimately will lead to higher taxes, despite what the gentleman says there's been enough tax relief, and get back to a fiscal path that makes sense so we can see small business grow again. And I yield.
First of all, the gentleman does this often. I never said there'd been enough tax relief. What you just said, I said. I never said that. Nobody heard me say that.
Well, I thought that the gentleman, Madam Speaker, had said that there's been so much tax relief under the current administration that it seems that all we need to do is keep spending. And
I think you anticipated, if I can, I think you anticipated what the facts are, as you know. I didn't say that, but you anticipated, I might say, 95% of the American public, 95% of the American working people got a tax cut, as you recall, in the legislation that you voted against. $288 billion in tax relief. That went into the pockets of Americans, helped them get through some very, very tough times, which we inherited, did not create, which we inherited, and moving forward. Now, with respect to the tax cuts or tax increases that you referred to earlier, they're going into effect because of a policy that I voted against, but you voted, I think you voted for. You were here in 01 and 03. And why did you do that? You talk about budgeting. You did it because you couldn't conform to your budget requirements. So what you simply did is you did the artifice, with all due respect, to saying, well, they'll expire in 2010. So what is projected to happen in 2010 is a direct result of the budget and the policies that you promoted and voted for, I tell my friend.
I would say to the gentleman again, if he's so intent on comparing the two, let's go just back to the Bush budget, which would allow us to cut the deficit by 50%. If he's so intent on saying how bad things were, let's stop the spending. But I would say to the gentleman, as far as tax relief is concerned, that tax relief to 95% of the public, 25% of the tax relief went to entities and individuals that don't even pay taxes. Now, in the minds of most Americans, that's not a tax cut, that's a handout. And that's why we've got to start getting back to basics, Madam Speaker, and insist that the kinds of things that we do here are actually constructive to job creation, because that's what we need to be about. Now, we can go through the litany of things in this President's budget and what the majority has done over its term in office this session to demonstrate taxes have gone up significantly over this period. It is time to stop taxing, stop spending, and stop borrowing.
Taxes have gone up in this period. What period are you referring to?
Well, I could say this year. This year, Madam Speaker, taxes have increased $670 billion. $316 billion of which comes at the expense of the middle class, breaking the President's promise.
And what were those taxes?
Ask what tax cuts or what tax hikes occurred over this session and during the gentleman's party's majority rule. We know that there was a $65 billion tax increase on tobacco products. There was a almost $7 billion tax increase under the stimulus law, repealing guidance allowing certain payers to claim losses of an acquired corporation. There was another almost $23 billion of surtaxes extended for the federal unemployment program. And there was also, Madam Speaker, as the gentleman knows, a delay of rules reducing double taxation of American foreign nationals to the tune of almost $6 billion. Those are the tax hikes that have occurred in addition to the overwhelming billions and billions of dollars inside the health care bill. So, Madam Speaker, it is not accurate for the gentleman to represent that, number one, this Congress has not raised taxes on the middle class. We know differently. And number two, to sit here and hide behind the notion that there aren't going to be tax increases at the end of this year, and the fact that that realization is not impacting job growth or the lack thereof. Now, that's not being completely accurate, Madam Speaker, and I would say to the gentleman, times are different now. It is time for us to own up to the obligations that we face as a country and work together to try and put this country back onto a growth path.